One Foot in Both Worlds, Keeping It Real with Tanya and Neto. We're still in the realignment series, series 2, and I think we're up to podcast 10, which is just amazing. We've done 2 interviews the last 2 episodes, and we were kind of expecting an interview now, but Spirit has decided that we're not going to do that. So, Tanya, you've been getting some information coming through, so let's talk about what you've had coming through, and then we'll see how that relates to the initial triangle sort of star that we were getting.
Sure. So they started coming through with this completely different shape, and it was like a line that went down, and then it had sort of a circle on it, and on that circle was 6 different points that stuck out, and those 6 points would spin on this circle on this line. And then it showed me a sequence of a whole bunch of those different spinning sort of circles on the line that ended up like a spiral. And it looked like a spiral. But what they also showed me was that these 6 points then can reach down and connect to the one below it. And it almost looks like a lamp. So, but under like a lamp shade. But underneath that, sort of what the light bulb was the triangle that we've been talking about. And they also told me that it relates to the Fibonacci sequence. So I very quickly looked into what the Fibonacci sequence is, and it's basically a spiral. I believe it's made up of 3s and 6s. Nobody quote me. But the other thing that they said is that somebody is going to be helping us that is a spiritual scientist. And I'm like, how do I find this person? They're like, you'll find them on social media. I'm like, okay, cool. So if anybody listening happens to be or know of a spiritual scientist, I am trying. It is not working for whoever this person is that, is going to come and actually teach us about this and make it more clear. So then, of course, I reached out to you and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I'm really, I'm getting this information. I don't know what it means. I had a bit of an idea that it was like the nervous system, but then when we had the interview with Elise Cathry, who's just freaking lovely, she was talking about her somatic practices and how that has so much to do with the nervous system. And then Spirit showed me that. They're like, there it is. That's what it is. It's the nervous system. So what they're showing is the different nerves that come off of the different points along the spine and along the nervous system. So that's the basics of it. They gave a whole bunch more information, but it sounds weird, but it's just not accessible to me at the moment. Like I can't, like I'm sure once we start talking, I'll be like, oh yeah, and then they said this, and then they said this, but it's interesting when for me, like when I was in Mexico, I got a download, but I was busy with my son and I was doing things and I was like, oh my God, I need to write this down. But it just didn't really stick in order for me, like when I actually had the time to write it down.
That's quite interesting. And I think that's interesting for everyone to hear too, because the way that the downloads, my understanding of the way downloads work is sometimes you consciously remember them and sometimes you subconsciously remember them. And so it's like that you did receive it and you will be able to access it at the time that you're meant to access it. And sometimes our busy brains just can't actually physically store that and still function in the same way. So it's put in a place where it's like, I'll get to you later. And then when you start talking about these things and your frequency gets to a certain level, it's like the door opens and you're like accessing a new library. Yeah.
Yes.
So everyone, when you get something, then you go later on and go, oh, I dreamt something and I half remembered it, or I was driving and I was thinking of this and now I can't remember. It's because you're not meant to remember it now, like physically or whatever's going on in your life. You just don't have the capacity to remember that, but it's still there. And we have this all the time, Tanya and I, like on here, because we'll start something and then it'll be like the doors are opening up. You're like, oh shit, now there's way too much to say. How am I going to cover that off in a podcast? So, but it was interesting because when you said the nervous system, I was just like, okay, well, my biology skills are really low. Like, I know this is my hand and my nose, I can point to the body, but I don't have a lot of other knowledge in that. But I kept getting a flash up of a picture that I got when I got my original download. So I went through the paperwork of that and I pulled out what Spirit had shown me was the connection of the intuitive side, not the physical side. And I had seen that week a video that had just come out actually on the nervous system from my old teacher, Nancy. And I was like, those pictures look really similar to something I've seen recently. I think it was on Nancy. So I went back to Nancy's post, and there it was, very similar to the drawings that I'd had. So I sent it to Tanya. I said, does this look familiar? Because this was actually one of the first things that came through with the download when they were trying to explain how information is actually moving through our intuitive side and that it correlates with our physical side. But I didn't really get that understanding properly until Tanya said, oh, it's the nervous system. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking at the nervous system picture. I'm like, oh my God, that relates. That is the same visual that I get for both. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense. And so Spirit was sitting there and it was like, it's the same way that you improve your system as you improve the intuitive system and the whole sort of awakening and realignment than we do with our own nervous system. So I literally Googled how to improve your nervous system. And I was like literally gone from saying, I don't know how the nervous system would really relate to any of this, to going, oh my God. So it said how to improve the nervous system. And the answer was remembering our triangle: diet, physical, and mental, right? Not in those exact words, but it said, your nutrition, your food and diet, the physical activities that you do. And I think it said meditation of the mind or something along those lines. And I was just like, this is our triangle. So the whole way to awaken our intuitive side is the exact way to calm and align our things. So, the realignment of that is identical, which is really what Spirit was trying to make sure that we were getting across. Like, I'm sure Spirit was coming back through you going, you've missed a major point, like that correlation, or it wasn't meant to be known till now. Like, I don't know, either way. Yeah, but I was messaging you going, wow, like I was blown away myself.
Well, and that's what I love about it is, I get that these are fairly simple teachings, but I think they're simple, but I think they're extravagant and phenomenal because we're really bringing it back to the basics. Because you and I have talked so much about keeping things balanced, having all of the points sort of taken care of in order to find balance within yourself. We're always talking about balance. And one thing that I know, like in my own life, calming your nervous system is absolutely paramount. Because if you're not calming your nervous system, you're not having positive thoughts. You're not having calm. You're not having a calm mind. You're not resting. So like, I know I was in my relationship with Kevin, I've had some crappy relationships prior to him, and he would talk about some things and it would just make my nervous system just go like straight up, and it would just boom, like I'm in danger,
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with him and I was like, look, you need to understand this is just what's happening inside of me. This isn't necessarily something that you're doing or anything like that. I'm like, tell my nervous system, because my nervous system isn't listening. Like,
yeah.
It was really fascinating, and I've had those experiences before. And what actually worked for me was dealing with my cortisol levels and my adrenals. Because for me, being a police officer for 23 years, and stress and go and all of that, your adrenals get out of balance. And when your adrenals get out of balance, you're shooting adrenaline for nothing, for no reason, or you're not shooting those things at all. Well, all of that makes your nervous system just be on like high alert, you know? So I definitely know what it feels like to be sort of reactive. And like, luckily for me, I was conscious of it, where it was like, look, like, you need to understand, this is just what my nervous system is doing. But,
Yeah.
but
And
yeah,
we
like
talked about it. We talked about it last week, didn't we, with the interview with Elise? Like, you know, I mean, your nervous system, one of its functions is memory. And so when your memory gets caught into that old past that you're talking about, and something comes up, and your nervous system is just so used to doing this trigger for it, this function that it's so used to, it's putting in place something that actually stops that cycle of that, you know, that trigger or that pattern that your nervous system is just so used to doing. And and
my experience, I'm sorry.
No, keep going.
My experience was that for me, it wasn't something that needed to be healed on like an emotional or a mind or a spiritual level. It was literally something that needed to be healed on a physical level, because when your cortisol levels go out, oh my gosh, which just brings me back to what they were talking about before. Remember, they were saying women are completely overtaxed, and it's throwing out their adrenals, which is throwing out their hormones. But those are all of the things that I had to sort of bring together and repair physically within my body in order to not have that. And truly, it was a physiological response. It was just a physiological response.
And I think that's what they're saying is you've almost got two nervous systems. You've got a physical nervous system and an intuitive nervous system, and both of them need to be be considered
in alignment,
and then they come in alignment. And just because, like, you know, I had a autoimmune disease for a very long time, an illness or whatever you call it, and I didn't know. And I mean, I'd had a stroke. My hands were literally crippled. Anyone who's watching the thing, I couldn't straighten my fingers more than this. If I did go down and lock things, I couldn't physically undo them. So from a physical point of view, I was very, very, very sick. I was joints, I had headaches, I had everything permanent. That's how I lived my life. But intuitively, I was still able to function. That was what was keeping me alive. So one of them I had, you know, that nervous system was doing really well, and the other nervous system was chaotic. And until I could actually get both of them working together, I was never going to be doing this work that I'm doing now properly. You know, I was never going to be healthy enough or physical. So rather than worry about my intuitive side, I had to really go back to physical. And I went and got so many tests done. I got everything. I was seeing every doctor. I was pretty much told that you will die probably soon, and we will find out in the autopsy what was wrong with you. And they'd done everything, gone to diet. And eventually I gave up gluten, not through a doctor, through a little bit of instinct and my husband saying that I should. And within a year, like, my hands are straight. I felt 10 years younger. Like, you are very correct in saying that some things just need to be fixed on a physical basis. It didn't matter how much how spiritual I was, how connected I was, how well my nervous system was for my intuitive. I was dying and I was going to leave that body. You know, that was it. I'd written the note to say goodbye to my family and put it in an envelope. Like, I truly thought I wasn't going to live much longer and I'd have another stroke. And now my life has just turned around completely. Like, I'm a healthy, amazingly fit person for what I thought. You know, I can jump on a bike or go on a hike or do those things that I literally couldn't do, whatever it was, 14 years ago. So it's that correlation, I think, that Spirit is trying to make sure we get across really strongly, is you need to work on both. You know, you need to work out which one's out.
And then the other thing that they're giving me so much stuff to talk about right now, so bear with me. One thing that they're saying is that in order for humans to reach the level of consciousness that they're wanting us to reach. And by that, I just mean growth, really. We need to calm our nervous systems. We need to calm that so that it can align with where consciousness is. And the way that they're showing it to me is like humans sort of aligning in like the spine of consciousness. I don't know how else to explain that. It's just sort of the visual that there's like a spine of consciousness, and humans need to be able to be in line with that in order to open up.
Yeah, I see the
crown.
spines. The spines and the minds are the ones that overcross on the intuitive and the physical in the diagram I see. So it's almost like we've got an intuitive spine and a physical spine that literally run together.
Yes.
Yeah. And everything else
it's
goes
showing me
side.
like this opening sort of up at top, which probably is the circle that is on your diagram. There was something else that they were saying to me, and I've lost it. So
while you think about that, I'm going to read the just before we came on, I had a download, so I'll read that unless it's come back to you.
Well, the other thing that I was just going to share, if you have your download written down and you're not going to forget.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to share is that I've always had gluten issues, and it took me a long time. So like I would eat gluten and I would actually have gut issues. I would get really bloated, and I would almost get like this depressed, like sleepy yuck feeling. So I ate mostly gluten-free, but I would cheat, right? Like I'm like, oh, this chocolate cupcake has gluten attached to it. So, you know, whatever, I'll cheat. And the consequences weren't too bad. But I started having, but of course I wasn't making the connection between, oh, my hormones are out, my thyroid's out, all these, you know, different things are happening. But it was around when you came to visit and we were talking about it because Renee is celiac. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you know, honestly, like when there's two people in the room, I'm the one that's not quite on the, you know, no gluten, fully no gluten train. Since then, I started going no gluten, like actually no gluten, no cheating. And what I noticed in that short amount of time is that my immune system was way up. I was doing so much, I wasn't getting sick. COVID went through the office, influenza went through the office, whole bunch of stuff went through the office, and I didn't get a thing. And usually when something's going around, I pick it up. So I was like, okay, this is great. Then just the other night, Renee and I were chatting, and she was talking about some of her old sort of symptoms. And I'm like, oh my God, I've had that. Oh my God, I've had that. Oh my God, I've had that. And I was actually getting some blood tests with my doctor and with my naturopath because my energy's been low. Like, yeah, I've been going through grief. Yeah, I've been having a bit of a tough time, but like low energy. And I've talked about it on the podcast. I'm like, I'm really action oriented. Like, this is weird. You know, I'm supposed to be clearing out my shed because I'm getting a she shed built.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be like a little girl party shed. I'm so excited. Anyways, I'm supposed to be clearing it out and I could barely bring myself to do it. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I talked to my doctor. He's like, okay, well, let's do some blood tests. So I found out I'm severely anemic, like super duper low iron. I'm like, oh, well, thank goodness, because I couldn't figure out, you know, so it was just kind of
it's
nice
an answer. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of nice to have like a medical reason for why I have no energy instead of beating the crap out of myself for months. Renee's like, well, maybe you can stop beating the shit out of yourself now for being so tired. I'm like, yeah, actually, she's like, you actually have a medical reason now. I'm like, oh, good point. Anywho, so Renee said, well, Tanya, maybe your iron is low because you're having malabsorption, because maybe you are celiac. So when I actually went to my naturopath, she's like, oh yeah, well, this isn't good. Like your iron's really low. Like, and sorry for any male listeners. She's like, well, how's your bleeding? I'm like, it's fine. Like every month, it's not that bad. I shouldn't be anemic. She's like, we need to figure this out. So I talked to her about it. She's like, that would make sense. And that would make sense for why my digestion is bad, for why my thyroid's low, for why my hormones are up, for why my nervous system was out of whack, for why my cortisol, because celiac is an autoimmune disease, where, and that's not saying I have it. All I know is that staying off of gluten makes a damn difference for me.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so we're testing for it, but that would make sense if my body is working so hard to fight and basically eat my own body because of this autoimmune response. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think it just reiterates the huge importance of diet. And I will know, I didn't always listen, I do now. If there is food in front of me, I will feel it in the back of my neck if I shouldn't eat it. I will feel it before I even touch it or try to consume it. If I'm paying attention, I will know.
Yeah. And actually, for everyone listening, most people will have a physical, like an actual physical reaction if they're not meant to eat something. And it is the subtleties that you got to listen to. Like, I didn't know I was allergic to gluten until I was like 40, early 40s. Yet I didn't take sandwiches to school when that's what we took. I took fruit. I didn't, when my brothers and sisters would eat certain things with bread and stuff in it, I just wouldn't. For some reason, my body, I did not like it. I liked it. It just would go, oh, nah. And I was quite intuitive, very intuitive as a kid. And I would just not do it. It was like something in my head would say, no, don't eat that. And so I wouldn't, and I couldn't have an explanation for it. But it is like, you know, you just know that you shouldn't do it. So feel for those subtleties of things. If you think you might be allergic to something, start feeling. Is there something that goes off? You know, you can do that yourselves. And it's interesting because while you were saying that, Spirit was reminding me of the symptoms of underactive and overactive nervous system, which, as I said, biology is not my thing. So this is going to be parroted from their information, so apologies as well. But basically what they were saying was, when someone has a food, a diet reaction that causes autoimmune, right? What happens is you go from an underactive to an overactive nervous system constantly. And so some of the symptoms of an underactive are like feeling kind of really low energy and sluggish and
brain fog,
unmotivated, right? So you're going in that. So you've eaten gluten and it goes through that. But unfortunately, they're saying it then triggers the opposite, which is weight gain. So one of the things of an overactive nervous system is like weak immunity, weight gain. I'm just trying to listen to it all because I'm like, I don't know what this is. Oh, they're saying you either get diarrhea or constipated, like irregular bowels. So unfortunately, when you're fighting an immune issue from diet, you get an underactive and an overactive going like this through your system. And so you get the weak sluggishness as well as the weight gain, as well as the unmotivated. Like, it's, some people can just have one. Like I never got the weight gain or the irritable bowel or any of those things because mine didn't actually affect my gut in the way it affected the rest of my body. But you know, you have kind of like a nervous system reaction in your brain and in your gut, and it's saying, you know, there's some people like me that it actually was a different thing to what a celiac is. And so mine didn't have any of those weight gains or diarrheas or things like, but for the majority of people, they're saying you will actually get both, which is like your body's so confused. It's overreactive, underreactive, overreactive, underreactive.
Well, it's in fight or flight.
Yeah. And it's just going boom, 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 because you're refueling it with gluten, and then, or whatever. If yours is onion and garlic, a lot of people actually have a reaction to garlic and onion. And so they will have the same thing. They're fine. And then they get thrown to the opposite side, and then their body deals with it and puts them back up again. It puts them higher because it's getting ready to be overreactive again. It goes underreactive, and then it'll go. And that's tough.
Yeah.
Like, that's really tough on your body to actually, and your nervous system to be jumping around in all those sort of things. And they're saying that it's also harder to diagnose because you're both underreactive and overreactive. And it depends on when you walk in the doctor, whether you go after lunch or before lunch, or, you know, 6 days into a diet or 7 days, because the 7th day is often your body starts to change a little bit. So there's sort of timings that happen with our bodies. So we're trying to work out a puzzle. And yeah, when your body's constantly moving, those autoimmunes are the hardest ones to pick up.
Well, and I think for me, I'm such a put my head down and plow through things, you know, that I just keep going and I just keep pushing through, and like, I got this, no problem. And, you know, by the end of it, my body's running on nothing but adrenaline because I got nothing left. But I'm very much like that. I can be very like, let's get her done. And I think what's happened is the symptoms and stuff have been so slow and so subtle, not even subtle, but slow on coming, if that makes sense. That I've had the joint pains, I've had all of it before. I've had all of these things, all of these symptoms, but I've just pushed through it.
Yeah.
And it's taken quite some time to potentially maybe be coming to an actual solution. But here's the thing, I've always known that gluten was a problem. I just didn't know it was a problem to this extent.
Yeah.
I like now for, I think it's been about a week, I've been doing like 0 cross-contamination. So I'm just like, I'm celiac and I don't even know this, but I just know that it's making a difference. And you know, my energy is slowly getting a little bit better. I'm also taking iron supplements. In a couple of days, I'm going and actually getting iron infusion, thank God, because I can't operate at this level anymore. But I've known this for a very long time and I've ignored it. So
yeah,
you
know, it is hard when you're in grief and things like that too, and a lot of changes in your life, because you've got to work out what it is. And when we're people like us, and a lot of the listeners will relate to this, where you're people that just push through and you don't want to whinge about your own body and deal with that, you then get to a point where it's almost breaking before you go, oh shit, you know, maybe
something's off.
Maybe I'm not just being a whinger, like maybe I am. Yeah, I am out.
What word did you just say?
Whinger.
What's that?
So someone who whinges and whines, like,
okay, like a whiner.
Like a whiner, yeah, we say whinger.
Gotcha, whinger. Your words. It just reminded me of, she sent me a message. She goes, oh yeah, the last podcast, she goes, oh yeah, I loaded up the podcast and everything's done because I'm going to be flat out tomorrow. So I said, oh, too bad, you're not feeling very well. Sorry to hear that. And she's like, she said to me, ha ha ha, I'm trying to figure out why you don't think that I'm going to feel very well. Because for us, like saying I'm flat out means like I'm exhausted. I'm just flat out. I'm tired. Whereas for you, it's like flat out is, you know.
Yeah, super fast. I've got a lot on for the day. It's I'm going to have no time left. It's almost
sometimes the communication is hilarious, especially because we have one foot in both worlds, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, and I don't want to give the, you know, and it's funny as we're talking about nervous systems and we're talking, I'm not I'm a medical medium, but I don't have any medical training. I don't have any actual understanding of these things. Like this is literally just me, spirit giving me information when I give readings, or, you know, me sort of getting these intuitive nudges, which unfortunately I ignore sometimes. But I don't want anybody to think that you and I are putting ourselves off to be anything other than 2 mediums sitting on a podcast. Yeah. And you know, just having our own personal experience.
Yeah.
Because neither one of us are anything. So I just want to do that sort of caveat. They've got something, they're talking about the nervous system being like the hub of the physical and the hub of the emotional and the hub of the spiritual. Like they're saying, if there's one thing that you need to make sure that you are aligning and you're taking care of, it's your nervous system. If the nervous system is out in any way, which is great about the star, right? Because these are the things that actually calm the nervous system. Yeah. But they're saying that if that is not aligned, that's how we go out of balance. And they're saying this is not cured on a mat. That's what they said right now. They just said this is not cured on a mat. This isn't something where we balance our chakras. Oh, that's the other thing that they were saying.
Yeah.
Was that the chakras
Symbolism.
align along the spine, which aligns along the nervous system. And then they also talked about Maslow's, am I saying that right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that your nervous system needs sort of that safety and security at the bottom in order for your nervous system to calm. So it's talking about all of, so that's what they were saying on the 6 points on the little round thing. They were saying that it's like the 6 points of the hierarchy of needs and the
Yeah.
6 points of the chakras as it sort of goes deeper.
And on the star, we've got the 6 points there. We've got the
Yeah.
community. We've got the middle one, and then we've got the 2 sub ones, which there happens to be 6 of, which is the community, which is listening, which is, you know, touching and feeling, the physical, which is the sun and the warmth, and which is air and breath, and the water, and like actual fluids and water. So those 6 elements just keep coming up in different things, and they relate to the hierarchy of the needs as well, you know, what we actually need with our physical touches. So it's really interesting seeing this star, you know, being downloaded, and then all these other things connecting to what it is, including the download I got today when we were about to go on. I messaged to you quickly. It sounded like a weird text, but the information was coming in, and I was just kind of typing it as I was going. I'm going to read it out. They said, to realign as a conscious collective, we need to realign our own nervous system. So this is not only for our own personal and individual, this is actually for not even humankind, but all living beings on Earth. And they're saying the triangle relates to the core pathway to do this. So that's the point of the bringing the triangle through. And it's not new information. And they say coupled with sleep, which was and they say, which is the spine, as the core channel for spiritual communication. So they're also saying that the 2 spines running together and the 2 minds sitting together, when we actually sleep, that communication between those is actually like, you know, one of our core things. And we've spoken about that, how important sleep is to all of this. It's where the strongest connection between our physical and our intuitive actually happens. And in times when your body, like your, you know, with you, where your body's out, where your diet has caused low iron and all those sort of things, they might not be giving you the information so that you can physically remember it, but it's 100% being channeled in the same strength and the same thing that it was before. It's not like you for all of a sudden become unintuitive as a person when you're unwell and you go, oh, I just can't think, I can't remember anything. They're just keeping it stored, and they're not channeling that at the same pace when you're sleeping. So you're not, or they're channeling it when you're sleeping rather than when you're awake, so that your body can physically actually deal with all this new information and all these issues and things like that. You might wake up in the morning and go, I've got to go off gluten. I don't know why, but I've just got to go off gluten. You know, people do that. And they just, well, listen to that gut, because that's what's happening at night. And they just finished with, as a human and as a collective is why we need to do this together. The triangle is purely a map to dual realignment of your intuitive nervous system and of your physical nervous system. So, you know, it's a great starting point for us to look at the core things, just as the other, you know, symbolisms that have come in the past that you've mentioned. They're all saying the same thing ultimately.
Yes. Yeah, but it's like they're saying it in a way that, you know, in psychology it'll be the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In the spiritual, it will be the chakras. In sort of what we're teaching, it will be this type of teaching. The other thing that they're saying is that we need to get back to basics. We need to get back to basics.
Yeah, which is what this is. Yeah.
100%. And they're saying it's not that complicated, but they're also saying consumerism has complicated this because everybody is trying to sell something. So we're being fed information that of these things that we believe that we need or how we need to do it. And I don't want to say that, you know, I mean, it's just true. People are selling things. If I'm running a physiotherapy clinic, I'm going to be advertising physiotherapy because that's how I get clients and that's how I make my business run. If
Yeah.
if I'm a spiritual teacher, I'm going to be marketing my meditations, or I'm going to be, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they're saying that's where we really need to come back and pay attention to what it is that we actually need, and stop being told by consumerism
Yeah.
what we are supposed to think that we need, because they're saying that really is very simple, but we've gotten, and they're talking to me just as I'm talking, it is very simple, but we've gotten so far away from the simplicity of how to actually make these things happen. And the other thing they were showing me the other day, and they're bringing it back, is people, like, let's just go with the chakras or the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're skipping the first three foundational pieces, which are the imperative pieces in order to have the foundation to root into. If you don't have those, but then we're having people trying to reach up into like the seventh chakra and into self-actualization, and the foundation and the roots that are required in order to reach those heights are impossible, because they're missing the simplicity of the strong foundation that's required.
Yeah, and the word I'm very much seeing that they're telling me is confusion. Like, people are actually confused. They don't know that they're being sold all this information. They're listening to this, they're hearing this, their friends saying this, they're doing this. They're like, I actually don't know what to do. Like, there's so much out there, there's so much to do. And what they're trying to just say is, it's really easy. It's back to basics. Like, that's what you need to do. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to listen to anything. You don't need to do any of those things. You need to start looking at your relationship with food in general, how you eat it, what you do with it. You need to have your relationship with your body, how you move it, how you care for it, how you listen to it. It's one of the things they're saying really strongly. You mentioned before how your body reacts when it shouldn't be eating a food. Our body is so intelligent, and it's designed to actually give us feeds constantly of what we shouldn't do, whether we should have more water, whether we shouldn't, dry skin. There's all these different things. You know, anemic, we can tell you're anemic if you go like this, you know, like you can see in your eye. There's all signs that our body gives us that don't need anyone else to sort of sell us something to do that. And also your mind. How do you care for your mind? What space do you give your mind? Do you take 5 minutes every hour just to sit and close your eyes? And then you become more productive and make up for the 5 minutes or more. You know, it's just reversing those things and just going back to such a basic relationship with your body, so that you can find out, who am I again? Like, you know, and everyone can do this. They're saying to me, there is not a soul that cannot do this, because it is all free and it's all thing. And I think next week we're going to be talking about choice, and that the reason that the humans are given so much choice. I'm hearing that really strongly now. So that's obviously going to come somewhere into that information, because they're saying we all have choices and we make them every day, and it's the choices that we make that and who we choose to listen to and how we choose to spend our money and all those sorts of things that actually.
Well, exactly. And if I'm seeking answers about, you know, my emotional state or what's happening for me, it is like information waterfalls, you know, coming in, and it's like, I don't know what the hell's going on. But spirit always provides the information that you need. They always do. If you stop and you stop, like they keep saying, looking out the window and not in the mirror, looking out the window and not in the mirror. You know, you're looking at consumerism. Oh, well, maybe I need to do this course, or maybe I need to do this meditation, or maybe I need to, you know, go to this retreat. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. If that's truly what's resonating with you, please go do that. But don't feel like you have to do, and we've talked about this, and that's what I find so fascinating, is we have talked about this over and over and over in this podcast, where we say, don't feel like you have to, just go within, right? And here's the thing, they're just bringing this to me, even if when I get my celiac testing, even if, because this is just an assumption, I could be wrong, even if it comes back and says, oh, you're not celiac, that does not mean that I'm like, oh, well, doctor said the test is fine. I can eat gluten now. And it's like, no, I know damn well I can't eat gluten. It doesn't matter
Well,
what the doctor said.
I can attest to that. So I did get 3 years before I went off gluten, I got tested for celiac and it came up negative. 18 months later, they tested me again for celiac and it came up negative. And it was only because my autoimmune, like the rating was so high that they were just trying to figure out. They tested me for lots of things, but it said no. So I didn't even try going off gluten because it said no. And I didn't eat a lot anyway. Like I really didn't eat a lot. So then I go off it for 6 weeks and my life starts to change. And then I'm like, oh shit. And I go back to the doctor and he says, oh yeah, it was, I can't remember, it was 8 or 9. Only 8% of people who have an autoimmune disease where gluten is the cause are celiac. The rest of them, we don't actually have a proper test for. So the only test you can do for that is to listen to your body. Go off it for 3 months, go back on it, and you'll know whether you've got an issue with it or not.
Yeah.
And it's like, why don't they, why would a celiac test be the only answer to something that it's only 8 or 9% of? It's like, it doesn't make sense.
I know we should be going to doctors and it's like, oh, I think I'm celiac. Okay, well, are you eating gluten? Yes. Well, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
how about before we do any test, you go off it for 3 months and we'll tell you,
and come back and let me know. Like,
yeah.
It's kind of funny. Like, what does a test really do? The reality is that as I go through life, because I think what was happening for me is I was getting cross-contaminated. And because I wasn't dealing with cross-contamination, I was just having the product itself just be gluten-free. But since it's been about a week and I've dealt with cross-contamination, I already feel better.
Yeah.
I already have less sore joints. I'm already sleeping better. I'm already having better digestion. Like I can actually feel a difference in a week. So even if I like, you need a label, and I could rant on this for quite some time. In order for me to get the treatment in society that I require for my health, I need to have the label of celiac.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to go to a restaurant and be like, oh yes, I'm celiac, or go to a friend's place and be like, oh, I'm celiac. And then they're like, oh, now I know what box I need to put you in and what care I need to take for you. Or say, you have, I don't know. I don't even have a good example, but we need labels in order to get the accommodations that we require in this world, in order for other people to be like, oh, okay, so I'm supposed to treat this person differently because now I understand their label. Like, my son has autism, and I went to my family years and years and years ago, and I was like, look, I'm sure he has autism, but I could not get the medical community to listen to me. They kept throwing me, I was a bad mother, I was all of these things, and he's very high functioning, but until I actually had that label, people didn't listen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
My family was like,
put it on. Yeah.
And I went back to them and I was like, hey guys, like, that's what was happening. And they were like, well, we didn't know. I'm like, why do I have to have a diagnosis in order to say, oh, this is what's happening, in order to get some grace?
Yeah. I spent the first 5
when
years.
You think about it, it's weird.
Yeah. I spent the first 5 years explaining I wasn't celiac to when people would ask at restaurants. And then my husband eventually said, just say yes, honey.
Yeah. And that's what I'm going to do.
Because it's easier, because they know what to do with that. And and they know that that's serious. So, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm worse than a celiac. Like, I will die. I carry an EpiPen, which some celiacs do, right? But a lot of celiacs could eat and just feel crap, whereas I don't. My throat, closes. So it's a different thing. And that's what I wanted them to know, was like, You know, I'd say it's kind of like a nut allergy. You know, you get that. And then in the videos, just please say celiac. So now I just say, they go, you celiac? You go, yeah, kind of. Yeah, let's call it that.
Yep.
You know, I'm still not saying
Right?
yeah, because I'm not. So I'm like, yeah, kind of. But it's the label that people have for someone who really can't have gluten or can't have cross-contamination. So it's like, you know, and I am grateful for anyone who owns a
funny because
restaurant that you cater for me. I am so grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's funny that we have to have a label on something instead of somebody just like people just intuitively being able to interact with each other. Like I think that's a bit of an example of sort of the, oh, okay, now we have this box, now we
Yeah.
do this. And it's like, why can't we just intuitively interact with each other? Why does there have to be all these
Yeah.
labels on things?
Especially when you talk about your son, because his condition is so diverse. So to put a label across it, you go, oh, okay, I know someone who's like that, and so therefore they'll treat them in that manner. But that's like could be so
you
not
meet
relevant
one
to him.
person with autism, you've met one person with
Yeah,
autism.
like, I mean, half of my nieces and nephews are autistic in different ways, very different ways. And if you were trying to put them into the one gluten-free, like, here's your meal, you would be so off the mark. So it's such a shame that as you said, we need these labels, because instead we should be saying, hey, this is how your son needs, like, deals with life and social settings, and if you can help him with that, that would be great. This is how my nephew does it, blah blah blah. That's it.
That should be enough. That should be enough for people to go, oh, okay, so you're a moderately intelligent mother that knows your son very well. Excellent. I'll take your word for it. But no, I had to spend $3,000 to get a medical professional to tell me so that my parents would understand. Like, what?
Yeah, and teachers and everyone else would go, okay, well, that's what he's in. Yeah. And I mean, that's just like me saying, I don't like crowds. Like sometimes if I get in big groups, I start to pick up lots of energy from people.
Yeah, I know, it gets overwhelming.
It gets overwhelming, right? So that's something that my friends and family are fully aware of. Like, I don't go to the movies because I struggle in cinemas. As everyone's watching a movie and their emotions are starting to go, I'm trying to watch it and get into it, and then I can start feeling everyone. And I'm like, I can turn that off, but it's like but I'm not enjoying the movie as much either, because I'm changing that. And part of the way that I work intuitively is that they actually are allowed to come, you know, to a certain degree all the time, in certain spaces. But so that's something they know about me. That's just how you are. That should be just like it is for your son. It should be like, this is his things, and this is, you know,
and that's it. And that should be it. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's interesting that the podcast sort of moved into that sort of that boxed thinking, that we don't just actually relate in a very intuitive way. But again, this is what Spirit is getting at. Like, get back to the basics. We don't need marketing. We don't need labels. And I mean, the reality is that we're always going to need some of these things to a certain extent. However, you know, we need to just intuitively trust ourselves.
Yeah, and they're saying less judgment. We spoke about that, and I think that may come into next week's podcast with choice. You know, it's I think you spoke really nicely about that at the very start of the judgments that we have on things. And so they're saying, you know, get back to the core. That's the triangle is the core. The triangle is looking at yourself, not looking out the window, looking in the mirror, having less judgment, having less labels, having less things like that. Don't get caught in all those marketing of all those things that are needed. Just get back to the core and say, what do I need? What am I having? Trust that Spirit is there on the right path with you. Sometimes you'll hear them, sometimes you won't. Sometimes your body, your physical is what they need. They know you need care for, and you won't hear them as much. And other times when your body's rested, you'll hear them a lot. It's just how it's going to be. So just go with it. Trust that they're there, and just get back to basics.
Yeah. Well, I think that basically says it. Get back to basics. Thank you, Nettie, for chatting with me today. Thank you, everybody that listened. Please like and subscribe. If anybody can come up with our spiritual scientist, I would be thrilled. And yeah, I will see you next week, and I'll see all of you next week. Thank you so much for coming.
Looking forward to it. See you all later.